Hello and welcome to It's All Local. I'm Seth McCoy. United States Senator Scott Brown is facing numerous challenges for the seat he now holds. I had the opportunity to speak with one of the candidates for this episode of It's All Local. Stay tuned. And joining me now is Mayor Setti Warren, candidate for U.S. Senate. Mayor Warren, welcome to It's All Local.
It's great to be with you.
So people outside of Newton may not be familiar with who you are, so tell us who Setti Warren is.
Well, I'm born and raised in Newton. I live with my wife and two children in the house where I grew up. I have really been in public service for most of my life. I served in the Navy Reserves, joined the Navy shortly after 9/11, did a year-long deployment in Iraq as a Navy intelligence specialist, and I spent over 10 years in the federal government working for President Clinton at the White House, Office of Cabinet Affairs, getting resources to states all over the country. I ran FEMA for New England for President Clinton, and I worked for Senator Kerry. I was his point person for small business, and it really brought me to this moment in time now where I believe that we're at a crossroads in our country, and the decisions that are going to be made over the course of the next several weeks and months and years really will have an impact on generations of Americans. I think about my two kids, my 3-year-old daughter and my 10-week-old son, when I'm out speaking to people and listening to people about the Senate race and what's going to happen, what's at stake at this election. And we have to make sure that this country lives up to its full potential. We invest in the things that matter, creating jobs for people, making sure that we have opportunities for people to get a skill set through education that will take them further and have them contribute to their communities. And also make sure that the environment that our kids and our grandkids walk into is clean as well. So we have a lot of work to do, and we have to make sure we're making the right decisions. And that's why I'm in this race right now. I think there's so much at stake.
You were recently elected as mayor of Newton. Do you see where some people might criticize the fact that you were just elected mayor and now you're running for U.S. Senate?
Well, gosh, I'm so proud of the work we've done in the last year and a half. You know, when I was running for office 2 years ago, I had no idea, and I know a lot of people didn't know, that Scott Brown would win and vote against the interest of communities like Newton and communities all across the Commonwealth. He's voted against funding for police, teachers, and firefighters. He's voted against critical funding for community development block grants for communities to employ people, provide critical human services, including the city of Newton. And he's voted against critical programs for early education. These aren't the values that I grew up with. These aren't the values I know that represent the state of Massachusetts, and they're certainly not the values I believe we should have in the United States Senate right now. It's such a critical time, and I believe strongly we need to make sure we have the right leadership in that seat. And you know, just this week, I'm really proud of the fact that we signed all of our 10 unions, municipal unions, onto contracts. We have all of our unions now set on the municipal side, signed on. And the reason why that's so significant is that in this climate, in this economic climate, we were able to, in the city of Newton, really sit down with our unions, negotiate fair health care benefits for our employees, but also protect the quality of life in Newton and make sure we're on the right financial path. And we used a formula, 2.5% growth rate is our revenue growth rate. We match that with compensation and health care to guide us all the way through. And those are the types of decisions and approach we need, skill set we need in Washington now. Though I'm proud of what we've done in Newton, we desperately need a United States Senator that's willing to take that same principled approach in making decisions in Washington at this critical moment.
There are some people, though, that might argue that we need somebody like Scott Brown in office to counter what Senator Kerry does. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I'm not quite sure where Scott Brown stands on the issues. I don't know that many people do in Massachusetts, other than the fact that he votes lockstep with his national Republican leadership 87% of the time. He promised to be an independent voice, but yet he takes votes that represent, in some cases, the most extreme elements of the Republican Party. And then he says things like, I'll vote for the Paul Ryan budget to privatize Medicare, shoulder thousands of dollars out of pocket for seniors, and the next week he says, I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure that that's an independent voice. I don't think it is. I don't think many people do. And I'm not sure that him voting lockstep with his national Republican leadership is an independent voice, nor does it represent what we need to do now in the state. Get working people the opportunity to get back to work. Make sure that we have proper education, resources for that here in the state of Massachusetts. Bring down the cost of health care for real for people and not cut benefits in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That's the kind of leadership I believe Massachusetts deserves, not the type of votes that are being taken by Scott Brown.
Job creation comes up a lot when politicians are out there on the stump. How would you create jobs for the people of Massachusetts if you become United States Senator?
Well, we can create jobs in the short term, right here in Massachusetts. One of the advantages we have is we have a workforce that is ready to be trained. We have training opportunities, and we have the type of technology that could spur job growth. Clean energy is a place where I think is a strength of the state. Example, we could retrofit our buildings, municipal buildings, our government buildings, and homes through using energy-saving, renewable energy types of materials. There's a great insulation that's being manufactured right here in Massachusetts, for example, that uses recycled material. National Fiber is the name of the company. They install in commercial and private entities, bring down energy costs by close to 50%. We can incentivize now businesses as well as municipalities to go out and do that type of work. It would save energy quickly and get people back to work. You have people who can install, you have people who obviously need to make sure they manufacture the material right here in the state. So this is a way to get people working right now. The other area is infrastructure. Our buildings are falling apart, our roads are falling apart, our rail in some cases is even antiquated or non-existent. We could get this economy moving for the short and long term by investing in areas like the T. We have a lot of breakdowns at T. Look, the governor's done a great job, and I love the GM, but we haven't invested in that infrastructure in 20 to 30 years, and we're suffering the consequences. Small businesses say all the time, I need to be able to move people and goods. I talk to small businesses and business owners in Newton and otherwise. We ought to invest in those areas now. We also should invest in things like high-speed rail, things like broadband in certain places in Massachusetts to really drive this economy, connect universities and markets and people the way we should, and drive the economy the way we should in the short and long term. So we can actually get people working now and create jobs for the future by making those investments.
All the jobs you're talking to sound like blue-collar jobs, which is, of course, what this country was built on. It was people putting the country together, building things, building buildings, building railways, building roadways. Do you think we've gotten away from people focusing on the blue-collar jobs? It seems to me that most people talk about, I'm going to college, I'm going to be, a doctor or a lawyer or a guy on Wall Street or a woman on Wall Street. And I think people have tended to get away from the blue-collar jobs. Do you think we need to refocus the energy and try to get people, instead of going on the college track, back into vocations?
Well, it's a great question. I think it's germane particularly to the Northeast and Massachusetts, where we've seen a loss in manufacturing jobs every single year for the last 25 to 30 years as we switch over to a new economy. The problem is a lot of folks in the middle class have depended on those jobs, living wage, to have the opportunity to purchase a home, have the opportunity to make sure they put food on the table, afford health care costs and otherwise. What we haven't done as a country is really invested in creating the jobs for the future. Not just jobs at the upper end, but also jobs in the middle. So that is exactly what we need to do. We need to focus on that. This does that in the short and the long term. We also have a strength in biotech, biomedical, and life sciences. Massachusetts is perfectly positioned with the types of small businesses and companies we have here. We can, through tax credits, small business loans, and investment dollars, grow those companies so we can create jobs at all levels here in Massachusetts. We could be a real leader if we make the investment. And that's where we need to go, job growth, growing the economy. That's what's made this country so successful in the past. We should be doing it now for the future.
You talked about the middle class. Some have argued that there is no more middle class, or if there is, it's shrinking and soon we won't have one. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree. There is a divide that is growing in this country. Real wages for the middle class haven't risen in the last 25 to 30 years. We have to make sure we are investing in job creation, making sure that people are making appropriate wages so that they can contribute not only to their community and their families, but also to the economy. We have not seen growth in this area for many years, and the United States should be investing in it now.
There are a lot of complex issues happening in Washington right now, one that happened recently with the debt ceiling vote. Would you have voted for the debt ceiling, and if so, why, and if not, why not?
Well, and I've said this in public statements, I am deeply disappointed in the debt ceiling package that was put together. It does not address the question of job growth, which I think is the key to our success at all. It doesn't address at all fairness in the tax code and revenue in any way, shape, or form. It continues to gut the very programs that create jobs and stabilize the economy, protect people with a safety net. So I'm deeply disappointed. I did, and I have stated, I would have voted for it because I would not want to see the United States for the first time in its history go into default and not protect the full faith and credit of the United States, our credit rating. Which would have massive impacts on our economy.
What would that
impacts? So I believe strongly that we need leaders and leadership in this country to focus in on what is important right now. Growing this economy, creating jobs, making sure we are actually investing and spending in areas so we can grow this economy, which would actually create more revenue and offset the debt and the deficit at the same time, as well as, in a serious way, revise the tax code, not continue to give the top 2% of Americans, the wealthiest Americans, continuation of the Bush tax cuts, which makes no sense at all.